Hello everybody and welcome back. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm Deborah Hatswell and you're listening to BBR Investigations. Are UK Bigfoot reports on the increase? And if so, is it due to COVID and the recent storms and floods? If the last few years have taught me anything, I should never be surprised by a new report coming in. Now, although current face-to-face UK Wildman reports are very rare, this year has started off with a rash of new sighting reports. During the summer months, we have had a steady supply of large cat reports, which have been witnessed by many dog walkers. There were a couple of strange Shuck or Dogman-like accounts, some animal mutilations, some UFO reports, and all manner of red and yellow-eyed creatures. Now, normally, as winter comes in, the reports start to peter out or die off. I think the weather's something to do with this, but that's only a guess on my part. Now, I've noticed a pattern over the decades that show a fall off of reports from, say, midwinter to late spring. Last year, there was a change to this pattern. Now, the Bigfoot reports doubled from the previous years, as did all the other reports of like werewolves and strange creatures. This year it switched again. From the last week of January to mid-February, we have had 2 reported sightings of a Bigfoot-like creature, but the reports are not south to north as in other years. It's always kind of followed that pattern that the reports came in from the south and went to the country. This year, they came in from the opposite direction. They came from north to south. Where I live, we've had very mild weather in the north. In fact, our 3 or 4 days of snow disappeared overnight. But southern areas of the country have had quite a lot of floods and storms. So the last few weeks have been like late spring where I live, whilst in other areas in the UK, there's major flooding and high winds. There is also a new sighting from the Midlands and another close by of a red-eyed creature in the Penkridge area in the Midlands. Here are those reports, and in some of these reports, the witnesses have been happy to record a short interview explaining what they saw that day, and I've included that also. The witness in our next case is named Aaron Bowers, and he saw what he described as a honey-coloured wildman on the 2nd of February 2021 at about 10 to 10 a.m. in the morning. And Aaron said, I have had a history of investigating a series of woodlands in the village nearby to where I live. I live in Staffordshire. I've experienced finding numerous tree structures, tree breaks. I've also seen an 8 to 12 foot tree off the ground. I've seen arched over trees whose tops had been anchored down under logs and scrub. Large and small crossed over trees, so X structures and suspended trees and tangled masses of branches. The mini kaplunk signs that you see. So there's a lot of activity in the area where Aaron researches, and he does go most days, and he just says, I have discovered a variety of indistinct footprints of 2 sizes. One seems to be about 8 inches long and the other seems to be about 12 inches long. And he went on to say, I intended to have another few hours exploring the local woodland. I just parked the car in a lay-by and I was stood outside. I'm in the process of putting my walking boots on, when my attention was drawn to a small area of woodland around about 300 metres away. I saw the head, upper body and legs down to the knees of a large hairy man. He or she was in the process of watching a group of pheasants in an adjacent arable field. They're attracted to an area where the farmer has deposited piles of stale silage and animal waste. Now, the hairy man turned to his right from a standing position and took 3 to 4 long strides, with arms sweeping, following an arc before entering a dense thicket of holly. He strode between 2 large ancient trees. His or her lower legs were hidden behind a pile of silage. Now, the hairy man that I saw had great bulk to his or her body, a negligible neck with a good-sized head, Facial features were indistinct due to the distance. He or she had long muscular arms, the hands of which were reaching down to the knees. The stride was smooth, and this creature's back was slightly sloping forward. There was no rise and fall of the body as it moved. The colour of the hairy body was a mid-mousy brown, but he or she had numerous patches of beige and honey-coloured hair about the head and shoulders and parts of the back. It was like a mottled appearance. Now, the paler areas were indeed hair, it seems, and not bald areas. If it had not been for the pale colour of the form and his or her movement, I may not have noticed it. Now, the pale colour stood out markedly against the dark green holly trees that the hairy form entered into. Had the body been black or dark brown, the creature may not have been noticed. Needless to say, I rushed to the area of woodland with a camera and binoculars in hand. Between the silage waste and woodland, there was a barbed wire fence. I rushed to get there, and a poster about 4 feet in height. The hairy man stood and moved behind the fence. From the fence post height, I would estimate the height of this creature would have been around 7 feet. Now, I find it really interesting about the hair because, as you'll notice in some of these reports, they talk about a light coloured hair. Now, as you know, Bigfoot reports, no matter where you are in the world, never just say, oh, they were black. They come in a myriad of colours, from all the way from like a reddish ginger through the browns and the blacks, all the way to complete white and grey. Is this a seasonal thing? Is this something that happens in a natural way so that they blend in almost with the seasons? I mean, I don't know. I'm just speaking out loud, I suppose. But yeah, it's always interested me that. Is there a colour for a season, or is the white or the greyness we see the same that you see humans with blonde hair or, grey hair in an older person? I'm not too sure, but I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that. Our next witness report takes us back to the notorious, or infamous, shall I say, Cannock Chase. Well, close to Cannock Chase, in the Penkridge area. Now, this is described as something with 2 golf ball-sized red eyes, and I'm sure locals to the area will know exactly where I'm talking about. Our witness says, I was driving on the A34 northbound. As I approached the roundabout, and just after Huntingdon and where it's signed for the Commonwealth War Cemetery, I saw something I cannot explain. It was late at night. It was about 1:15 a.m. and that was Thursday, the 4th of February, 2021. As I was driving, there was a dark woodland on both sides of me, and 4 deer were just standing there stationary in the road. That's really unusual, and there were other drivers on the road. They were herded together just on the other side of the roundabout. The deer didn't move out of the way, even from the path of an Arctic lorry. I had to negotiate around them and take the lane on the opposite side of the road. I was really confused about their behaviour, and that's really out of the ordinary for deer. I slowed right down, and I started to look to where the stationary deer appeared to be staring. And after a few seconds, I saw something between 2 trees. They were approximately 5.5 feet apart. I looked at the 2 trees, and between them I saw 2 red lights. Now, the lights were the apparent size of, say, golf balls, around about 6 inches to 12 inches apart. I had a good eye level from where I was sitting in the lorry. I think I was approximately about 10 feet off the ground. And as I passed the deer, they seemed to break their trance and scatter into the nearby woodland. Now, he says, I use this road regularly when the M6 is closed, and it's always used as a diversion route, so I'm really familiar with it. I've seen wild animals before, but I don't know what those red globes were. I mean, it could have been eyeshine, I suppose. Whatever it was, it spooked the deer out of the woods onto a major road filled with traffic. And it was dark, and there could have been a serious accident down there. I mean, that is very strange behaviour for deer, as we know. They do run out across the road, and sometimes that can cause an unfortunate accident. You see them, come bounding out of the woods. But standing, herded in the middle of the road, that's rather strange. Well, let me take you to another new report, and this report comes from my area. Not too far away from where I saw the Wildman. And anyone watching the video, that was the first picture that you saw tonight. So let's have a listen to a weird bulky man or a Salford Bigfoot. And this happened on the 24th of January, 2021 at 3:30 a.m. in the morning. Reports come into me many ways, but this report came into me by email, and a gentleman simply put in Bigfoot and the word Salford, and I popped up. Now, he described it as a weird, bulky man, but when you listen to the description of the body and the movements, see for yourself, you see what you think. Hi, Debbie. I just did a Google search for Bigfoot in the town of Salford, and you popped up there on top of the page. I did the search because the other night, about 3:30 a.m, I went to the window in the flat that I live in, and I wasn't looking for anything in particular, but as I was looking out, I could see across the road from me. And I kid you not, there was what looked like a large Bigfoot creature just loping up the road. I don't know if it was a huge guy jogging with lots of layers on and he was going strangely up the road. His movements sure were odd. He didn't look like he was straightening his legs in between strides. And he had arms that were dangling down at the side. Had this kind of big head. But it was really dark here, so it was hard to see him clearly. Now, he came up the road and then he took a left at the top near the underpass from the looks of it. I only moved in here last March, so I'm not familiar with Salford at all. But I can tell you it got a kind of what the out of me, and I don't surprise easily. That was either one giant dude or this massive fit guy running up this road in a costume in the middle of the night. Or it could well have been a Bigfoot creature. From the little I know of the area, it looks like there's a park just down the road there, and there's some trees and lots of open land. Either way, I figured you deserved the heads up at least. It really is dark here, and the street light is off across the road, so I couldn't say for certain either way. But that was one big, wide dude, and he was just loping up this road like he was on a mission. I'm surprised he didn't have a heart attack. He thought it was just a bloke. He was running up the road on one side, and he crossed over at the intersection there, just past the underpass. He took a left down that long road next to the motorway. I want to just put it down to say a huge rugby player or something, but his run was really strange. The lack of straightening in his knees between the strides and the way his arms were dangling down. Plus, he had a huge head that looked pretty hairy, and it stood out to me. It's the last thing you would expect to see in Salford. Welcome to my world. I don't think I've ever seen anyone running with dangling arms before. And for such a big guy to move up that incline, I imagine he would have had to be super healthy or risking a heart attack going up this long road or hill. He said, I weigh 15 stone, about 5'10", and he was far bigger than me. When I see other joggers jogging past here, they look like thin sticks compared to the guy that I saw out there. I think it was a creature. Now, if I see him again and he's just a huge bloke, I will mail you back and apologise for wasting your time, Deborah. But it was strange enough for me to think about it for a few days and run a Google search to see if by any chance anything like that had been seen around here. Now, I really was expecting to get 0 results for it, I must admit. I think there's a park around the corner, but I'm not sure how big it is or how far it goes. There are some pretty big roads around here from the looks of it, but I'm not familiar with the area at all. So I really couldn't guess at how accessible it would be to get to deeper woodlands. I would be surprised if there would be enough food in this forest around here to sustain such a big creature like the fellow I saw. But honestly, I don't have enough information on it at all to judge. After seeing your report and video on your own experience, I thought I'd drop you a quick message and give you a heads up. But from the size of that guy, I would say, please be careful if you go back there, Deborah. Now, the road this gentleman's talking about is over a mile long from top to bottom, and the incline is unbelievable. It's like a mountainside going from the bottom of the road to the top of the road, because we are on the Pennine Fault, so we're right at the top of the peak, and then there's like two valleys that fall away either side of us. So the road that he's talking about is right next to the part where my experience happened. It's just like, I don't know, about 25 steps, something ridiculous like. So no, I'm exaggerating, but it's the same. It's on the same road. As I say, it's on a very I'm sorry, I'm whittering because my head's gone straight back there now. I'm just doing that thing that I do where I think, how did he get there? You know, how's he got from there to there? The road's on a really steep incline, so like the docks are at the bottom where the Manchester Ship Canal is, and then at the top of the road is part of what we call the Pennine Fault, so it's along the fault line. So you've got like two steep valleys, as I said, running either side, and they're river valleys. And then lots of other rivers and streams join them, and they kind of flow up to the Pennines, which is, anyone outside of the UK know, is like the spine of the UK. It's a mountain range. And you can go anywhere you want from there. You can go to Wales, you can go to Scotland, you know, wherever you feel like going. So I can't say that if this chap saw the same thing as me, that would be impossible for me to do. I wasn't standing there with him, looking out of a high window, you know, watching the world go by below in, I think it was snowing lightly that night. I'd do that myself not too long after my experience. I'd watch the road all night, waiting for the sun up. I did see some very strange things out there at night, human and non-human. How long it will be before the next person sees him or his kind, I'm not really sure of, but I'm sure we'll get more reports. The reports in the area now stem from the 1950s. So you've got a chap in the 50s who saw a chimp drinking from the stream. You've got a chap in the 70s who saw a naked hairy man chasing a fox. You've got me in 82 who saw what I would class as a man and an ape combined. You've got Brenda in 84 who also described it as a man and a chimp combined. Then we go to 2012, Tony on a mountain bike who saw what he described as a red-haired creature in a typical gorilla stance. Our next one would be 2016 on the Ellesmere Golf Course, and that was seen by 4 gentlemen. That was described as a Bigfoot, hairy type creature. It gesticulated at them and screamed, and it seemed to be that there was more than one there at the time. Well, I've missed one out. About 2005, a lady who was ill in the park at a function saw what she described as a grey, hairy-faced man that growled at her from the bushes. And then we jump to 2017, where a chap and his son out walking saw something, and now this report from early January. So as you can see, it's, you know, it's a lot of reports from my little area, but not only does that astound me, but the amount of reports that come in around about Christmas time. Now, if these creatures move at times, say when we're asleep or when the weather keeps us inside in bad weather, then as the world becomes more and more isolated and we're forced to spend more and more time indoors, will these sightings increase? I mean, I think they will. Will there be a flip in the balance? Will we become the creatures who rarely venture outside? Now, our next report came in on the 1st of February this year. The event happened during the floods, obviously caused by excessive rain and the bad storms that we've had here in the UK. Temperatures this year are much colder, and the UK has been battered with storms and gales. Historically, it's our worst weather months are yet to come. So is this the reason why so many of the wild folk have been spotted this year? These reports are not only current reports, they're not the only ones that I've taken in the last 6 weeks. These are just the reports where the witnesses were happy for me to share their experience. Other reports have come in, and obviously they're not ready for me to do that yet. So hopefully over time I will be able to bring you all of our winter-spring 2021 reports when the witnesses are at a stage where they feel ready to share. Now, as I say, our report came in during the floods on the 1st of the 2nd, 2021. And the gentleman described it as a woodwoose in a flooded field. And he says, as I was going to work in the morning, I saw something drinking from the recently flooded field area I pass most days as I'm driving the van to work. The figure was standing in the flooded fields where the River Ouse had burst its banks. It looked like a woodwoose. It was really, really tall. I estimate about 8 feet, and it was completely hair covered. I could even make out wet hair hanging down on its hands from dipping its hands into the water. The creature seemed to be looking at something or looking for something in the water. At one point, it used its hands to shade the water. And I wondered if the field was being flooded, that maybe there was some fish, maybe still trapped in the field there. The water was less than a foot deep in places. He said, I couldn't pull the van over in the bend for a long time. So I saw this as I was driving, and I saw it around 3 times from 3 different perspectives. It bugged me all day. So I went back after work to the same spot, just in case I'd mistaken a stump or a tree for the creature that I saw. When I returned, I could see nothing that could have tricked my eye. Now, the area it had been standing in was clear. I had a good line of sight, and I am now certain I saw an upright hairy, 2-legged creature in a flooded field. I must commend our witness on not only returning to the area as soon as possible, but also for recording his experience on his phone, so he had a detailed account of what happened later. Our witness is an outdoorsman. He is often out for hours on end in the woodlands, so he's used to our usual wildlife. This creature stood out to him as unusual. He didn't feel scared or threatened in any way, and although he could make the woos out very clearly, there was an expanse of water between them. He said it had an oval-shaped face that I could not see clearly at all. Its hair was really dark brown, almost black, and he was really big. I don't mean just in height, he was broad and thickly muscled. I'm just gutted I didn't get a photograph. I'm certain of what I saw, and I've had a few days to clear my thoughts, and I don't want to make any changes to the report.
Just come back. This is after I've knocked off work, but quite a way down this road I keep getting glimpses of this sort of view from different perspectives, and I'm sure I saw a wolf. I've just come back to make sure there's nothing I could have. So in this general area here, you see that row? It comes from behind that hedgerow, which is like there's a second field over there, and it were like wading through there. And it were very long hairs, and if you can imagine hands curled up, the hairs come from the cuff area over its hands. It were like not super dark black, like these ones that absorb light. It were probably a charcoal grey colour, but it was silhouetted against the water here. And I'm just looking if there's anything there that I could be mistaken for it, but there ain't. It were a big boy. Yeah, definitely a big boy. Anyway, he come from different perspectives. He come over this sort of line, and he was wading through the water here, looking down, bending down every now and again, looking, and at one point he put his hand over the water. So yeah, I've just come back to double check. I want to get it clear in my own mind. I have to, because when you're going along a road, I slowed right down to about 35. There was no one behind me, so I could slow down. And he sort of come round that area where I'm looking now, but he come from sort of when I first saw him, he was just coming over that line, and he come through here, waiting. He was looking for something, or he was foraging or fishing. I don't know what he was doing. He had long hair over his face, but he weren't like slim at the waist and top heavy. He was thick all the way down, really thick dude. I reckon over 8.5 foot, easy. And there's nothing there I can see. I just wanted to clarify this in my own mind, because when you're driving along, you're seeing it from different perspectives. And I had about 3 glimpses at this area coming up this road from Kraken Hill. Well, I'm on Kraken Hill, from where I turn onto this road. And it's the road from Harrow to Lavenden. I'll give you the coordinates of where I saw the sighting. But he were a big dude, he really were. One of what I call the Bedfordshire big boys, because everybody else seems to think they're smaller in this country, but there you go. He were big. He were really big. I think he was over 8.5, he could have been 9, even more. But he were big as in, not tall big, but big, if you don't mind. Really thick. Straight all the way down, not narrow at the waist like Pixel Rose. His very shoulders and chest. I just want taking. Well, this is where I saw it anyway, and it's the 1st of February, 2021. I saw this approximately 9:30, 10 in the morning. No, probably more like 10. On my way to work. But this is where the Ouse burst its bank and come over the fields. The Ouse is in that direction. So the river Ouse bursting its banks. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? What was he looking for? What was he foraging? Was he fishing? Was he needling? I don't know. Down where I was looking at him. Yeah, we'd have come from behind there somewhere when I was seeing him. And you know, when you're driving along, from different perspectives, you've got trees flashing past. It can seem like the subject's moving when it's actually you moving, but the bit I can't get over is he was definitely more upright at some points and bending down. It might have given an appearance to be moving, but it was more like it was upright and then bending down to look and then up again. I reckon he come from around where we're looking now, over there. He'd already come over there, but he was obviously coming from that direction, and he come sort of around here. And this is where I stopped seeing him, roughly where I'm looking now. Obviously, he was silhouetted against the water, so I couldn't make any mega detail, but he wasn't super black, like, see that bush? You know, it was moderately similar to that colour. It looked blackish, but it wasn't like super black. Obviously, like that bush is silhouetted against the water. So I'll give you another perspective of another angle I would have seen him from. Another perspective, even further back, where I would have seen him. Yeah, that area was that more or less exactly where, that white area, exactly where I saw him from that bit. And there was a bit one further back. Do you realise how cold that water is? How cold it is? You'd be hypothermia very quickly now, I'm telling you, that is ice cold. Even if you had waders on, I'm sure that would be bloody freezing. Sorry about the wobble. Yeah. I'd have seen him about here, going across here. See if we can get any more perspectives if I go back. I've kind of glimpsed him 3 times. I mean, as I say, you've got trees flashing by. You're trying to keep your eyes on it and concentrate on being on the road, obviously. Don't want to have any accidents, although there wasn't much traffic around.
Our witness went home. Obviously, had a cup of tea, got himself dried and everything, had a sit down. And when he was calmer, he spoke again about what he saw in the morning. gives a much better description of the features and things like that. So have a listen. And I'm incredibly grateful for him. And I will be recording with him in the future. So obviously I'll bring that to you. But yeah, have a listen to him now. He's a little bit more calmer.
So I'll just put that arrow in roughly the way he was moving. So what I've done here is with what I took my camera, I zoomed into the bit where he was, took the background, sketched him out on a bit of paper, and took a photo of that, and then in Photoshop stuck him in there, put the reflection in. I put a bit of a highlight because his face looked oval, and a bit of a highlight on his thigh. Well, I saw a bit of light struck him. It just wasn't enough to be able to even see any features of the face or anything like that. As I say, he probably had hair hanging down over his face because he had sort of longish hair. And the hair coming off his cuffs. Now, what I think was, this is logical, right? Because if he's had his hands in the water, it's going to weigh his hair down, and it's going to stick together. It's wet into more of a point. So that's quite logical, isn't it? If you think about it. What's also logical is, and I was thinking about this, if you look where the water is at the bottom of the bushes, right, I doubt that is even 10 inches high in places, or even shallower. Maybe a foot in places, because what these fields are is like really rough sheep grazing land. You know, it's basically grass and a little bit scrubby, and it's a bit uppy and downy. So my theory is there's nothing there for him to have apart from fish. Now, if the ooze has burst its banks and the fish have got stuck in the shallows, that's easy pickings for him, isn't it? That is possibly why he's come out. They seem to know the limit of, you know, the difference between dark and shade, and where they're more masked and can blend in, and the distance of human eyesight to make out anything clear. They seem to have a really good idea of that. So that's that bit. And so I've done my best to show you what it looked like. He was moving very slowly, and as I say, that he's more upright there. He was almost hunched forward to a certain extent, because they carry themselves like that. I mean, in fact, that is probably what drew my eye to him in the first place. It was more the posture and how he carried himself. I was like, that's not a human, that's a woes, that is. My eyes told me straight away. Yeah, I probably made him a bit black, a bit too black, but, you know, you get a rough idea, and I think I got that pretty good. I mean, by the size of the bushes, that's how I scaled him, because I remember that was about the same, but obviously that's more in the distance, so he's a bit bigger than he is. So that's basically that. So yeah, I reckon that is the most likely explanation, that he was taking advantage of an easy meal, picking fish off, I think. Anyway.
I'd have to say I do agree with our witness. I think the woo saw, whatever creature it was that he saw, was looking for food. If the ooses flooded the field and then retreated, you probably got less than a feet of water, and there'd be some decent sized fish in it, you know, and it would not so hard to catch them. You see, indigenous tribes, we used to do it in England. We had like a strange horseshoe shaped basket, sorry, I don't know why I said blanket, you know, then again, they might have done it with a blanket years ago, you never know. But basically, when the field's flooding and you've got like 6, 7, 8 inches of water, you just skim with this U-shaped basket and, you know, pick fish, like shooting fish in a barrel, as they say. So yeah, I think that's probably what he was doing. He was looking for food. It's lean times. There's not a lot out there, as I say. Further down the country where that report took place, there has been snow and floods and lots of rain. Now, our next report comes from not too far away from this area. A man out walking came across a strange set of footprints in the wet ground. Now, as you can see from the prints, they appear to be very fresh. And although it looks as though there are claw marks on the toes, this is due to foot movement as whoever made the prints continue to walk. Now, thankfully, this gentleman also had the foresight to take photographs of the prints. So here is his report in his own words. And this happened on the 7th of February 2021 at about 3:30 p.m. And he said, me and my partner went for a walk in the woods nearby to me in South Kent. I'm near the East Sussex border. And we went for a walk in the woods and it was snowing. We got about halfway in and it was very quiet, as you'd expect. Upon taking a right onto another path, I had a look down because the snow suddenly picked up. The weather got worse. And this is when we spotted several footprints meandering across the path. Now, we pondered on it for a bit and then we took some photos and moved on. And just as we got around about 50 feet or so up from the tracks, from the prints, I heard a pop of wood, a kind of pop go off in the woods, down a valley, and not very loud, but definitely a knock or a pop. Admittedly, I'm not ruling out a person could have done this, but the weather conditions and the situations were abnormal for barefoot walking. The prints were fairly broad and there were slips and other signs of natural movement there. Now, the pop could well have been a branch snap from snow load, but it's only a few inches deep at the moment. There's not that much of it. And the timing was just uncanny. It's definitely interesting and it's definitely worth a proper investigation, he says, as soon as possible. This happened completely out of the blue and what was just a normal walk where my brain, honestly, was on the weather and nothing else. Just to the north of this footprint find, there is another set of footprints that were found along the Medway, and that was in 2013, and that was somebody out walking their dog. And that witness said, years ago in 2013, in the middle of one of our worst winters, I was out early walking my dog before work. It was around 5:45 a.m. and I took her on our usual route, which takes in a large field on the edge of an urban development. And where we are, there is countryside for several miles there. Our walk is next to a moderate-sized wood above the River Medway. It had been snowing heavily during the night and it was well below freezing. And it was dark still, it being December and all. As we got about halfway round, when I saw in the torchlight, coming from my right, a set of footprints in the snow. And they looked like bare feet. Now, the snow was still virgin, apart from the usual rabbit and fox tracks. The footprints continued across the field from right to left. Now, my dog was snuffling them and showing an unusual interest in the prints, and she was casting about and going a little bit mental. The really strange bit is that the footprints started on the edge of a massive barricade of bramble bushes, and there was no sign of any pathways, apart from a small fox rabbit run. Now, the snow looked to have been knocked off the top of the bramble thicket, and there was no other human footprints other than mine. He said, I followed the very clear trail across the width of the field. I'm 6'5" and I've size 13 feet. These prints looked a little bigger than mine, say 13 and a half, a size 14, something like that. And I tried to copy the stride, which was equal roughly to my own. They were broader and very deep, but obviously a bare footprint with toes, and that was obvious to me, he said. They then went down the snow-covered rubble slope. That's an entrance to By-Jews Wood. My dog was still acting very excitable, and following a scent she found different. I took stock and I followed the trail about 20 feet into the wood, and then it just became too impossible to find it. Now, the problem I have is the size and stride of the footsteps are certainly within human range, he said. But it'd be a tall human like me, but not outlandishly tall. Why would someone try walking across a bare-footed, snow-covered field and leave a trail of tracks? Like I say, it's an impenetrable barrier of thorns and brambles, and that backs onto the housing estate. Now, the trail started from the right of the copse in the middle, and then they skirted around it into the woods on the left. And like I said, they just sort of started on the edge with no sign of a disturbance around. Now, that is a strange one. As I was compiling this report to share with you, I was contacted by one of our members on YouTube who had a strange handprint that was also found in the snow. So I'm sure the reports will continue to come in. And there is an older winter report. It's from back in 1988, but it's one of my favourite ones because it has more than one phenomenon in it. And it's a shepherd that found strange prints up in the snow on Crossfell. As I say, it was 1988. Now, Crossfell is in Cumbria, and it's an area where a shepherd, as I said, experienced some kind of very unusual events whilst looking for his lost sheep on the summit of Crossfell in 1988. Now, the shepherd tells a story to the BUFORA, which is a UFO reporting site, and she talks about ramblers in the area who have reported unusual anomalies, strange feelings which cause them to feel apprehensive and uncomfortable. They feel like they shouldn't be in the area, and many of them just turn back home, especially after dark, she said. Now, the shepherdess concerned had been out with her partner, searching for some sheep that had gone astray. And then it was winter, and there was a great deal of snow. They agreed to separate and go in different directions to search for the sheep. And as she and her partner separated, she came across an unusual set of footprints. She said, "The dogs and I sat on the summit rocks to eat sandwiches, and we needed a well-earned rest, when suddenly there was a violent swishing, rumbling sound. Looking back over the summit ridge itself towards the Dunfell radar beacon, there was a peculiar cloud or disc which hovered for a second and disappeared down Eden Valley. I decided to retrace my steps down off the summit and continue looking for the sheep at a lower level when the second weird event happened. Not only were there my tracks and those of my two collies, but two more alongside them of a much larger size and deeper tread. No one could possibly have made them in the short time that I turned to observe the strange cloud. My way up was at all other times in my view, and from where I'd been sitting, I would have been able to see somebody. Also, one of my collies started to sniff at the strange tracks that had been left. So what happened up there on Crossfell? I'm not too sure, but it would seem that I can't say this year that winter season reports are very rare because they've just come flooding in, and I will keep you updated with them. I've got some amazing cases coming up, some fantastic witness interviews, and I'm sure that you'll enjoy them. So until next time, thank you very much. Good night, everyone.